You're following along in the service, you should be right there. And we'll read James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. We're moving through the book of James consecutively, and today we read, "If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all he does." This is God's word. Now, we said that, and we began looking at James last week, that the first subject that the book of James in the New Testament covers is how to handle trials, troubles, and suffering. And actually, the passage from chapter 1 at the very beginning, all the way chapter 1 down to verse 12, is all about this. And when you get to verse 12, there's a summarizing verse which we'll look at next, the week after next. But the point is, the whole chapter is about how to deal with, the first 12 verses are about how to deal with suffering, how to deal with troubles. In the very beginning, James says, count it all joy whenever you fall into these different trials, because these trials can actually make you mature. Now, what we read here, verse 5 to 8, if you look at it and you forget the context, if you look carefully, you'll see that in the verses that we have printed, this little section, which is a unit, in the section it makes no reference to suffering or trials. And so if you look at it and you miss the context, if you just look at it, you may think that this passage, these verses, are really about faith and prayer and wisdom in general. And you'll go really astray if you think of it that way. You have to understand that this is linked very tightly to what we looked at last week. James says, when you suffer, it can make you mature. It can furnish you those qualities of character that you lack. And then look at the very first verb in verse 5 says, and if any of you lacks wisdom. Now, do you see what the point is? This is not talking about wisdom in general. This is not talking about prayer in general. It's not talking about faith or doubt in general. It's talking about when you get into suffering, when you get into troubles, when you get into trials and tribulations, the main thing you need is wisdom. And how are you going to get it? That's what this is about. This is not a way, we should not be trying to extract out of here, though I'm sure you could get something from it. You shouldn't try to extract out of here what the Bible teaches about faith in general, about wisdom in general. It's trying to say the main thing you need, the first thing you ought to check in your heart when you fall into trials and suffering is, do you have the wisdom? That's the main thing you need. The main thing you need to face suffering is wisdom. Now, I know that is not the way we think anymore. Listen to this. Here's a quote by C.S. Lewis that's worth volumes. Listen. He says, "Of old, the cardinal problem of human life was how to conform the soul to objective reality, and the solution was wisdom, discipline, and virtue. But for the modern mind, the cardinal problem is how to subdue reality to our wishes, and the solution is a technique." There's volumes in that. That may not grab anybody the way some of the other quotes, but there's volumes in there. He says, of old, and he's not just talking about Christians. He says, all the cultures before the modern culture, the great question in life was, how do I conform my soul to what is? That's wisdom. Wisdom is, how in the world do I address the life as it is? How do I conform my soul to objective reality? And the answer was wisdom. Today, the question is, how do I conform objective reality to what I wish? And the answer is always a method, a technique, a pill. A how-to book. Completely different than the way it used to be. And James is trying to show you that that's exactly, what Lewis says is exactly right. The main thing you need to know is wisdom. When you go through anything, grief, for example. We've lost a loved one. Divorce, which is a terrible experience. anything that comes along, read the books in the bookstore about these things, and you'll always say, this is how it works. This is what you have to do. Here's the 7 steps. Here's how you can change the situation to match your feelings, rather than how to change the heart to match reality, which is wisdom. Now, the real question is, how does that happen? If you read verse 4, and we don't have it in front of us, verse 4 actually says, literally in the Greek, it says, let suffering have its effect of making you mature. Let it. Suffering doesn't automatically make you better. It can make you bitter instead of better. So when James says, let it, what he means is, just because bad things are happening to you does not mean you're going to become this great human being. You could be a shell of a human being. So how can you do it? And the answer is, you've got to look to wisdom. And that's the only way to understand this passage. Go for wisdom. Let me just answer, let's just deal with this in 2 ways. First of all, let's take a look and see why wisdom is the main thing you need when suffering hits. And secondly, how wisdom can, in other words, why we need wisdom in trials and how we need wisdom in trials, okay? How we get it. Why we need it, how we get it. Why we need it, how it comes. How do we seek it? All right? Point 1. Only 2 points. That's what you think. Point 1. Why do we need wisdom? Now, let's explain this for a moment. You say, what do you mean wisdom? What does Lewis mean, wisdom? What does James mean, wisdom? That's not what I want. I want to get out of it. That's what I need. Or I need to find a way of handling it or controlling. What you need is wisdom. Suffering, these terrible events, I have to say this carefully because somebody's going to misinterpret it. These terrible events come to us, but to a great degree, what makes suffering suffering, and to a great degree what makes trouble troubling, is not the event itself, but what we tell ourselves about the event, how we interpret the event, the wisdom with which we receive the event, the beliefs through which we see the event. Now, and a great illustration, which I've probably used before, because again I've gotten out of some of my standard authors that I read, said, here's room 101, and you usher a newlywed couple into it. This is their honeymoon night. They've just been married this afternoon. You usher it in and say, how would you like to stay in this room? And they walk in, they look around, and they say, what a dump. Give me another room. But what if, just a few minutes later, after they'd left, you took a man who had been convicted of a particular crime and sentenced to a particular crime and sentenced to prison, and you bring that man up into the same place, room 101, same room, nothing's changed. And you open the door and you say, how would you like to spend the night in here? And you look around and say, wow, great. See, for the one group of people, there's a couple that looked at the very same place and said, this is difficult, this is troubling, this is disappointing, this is awful. And somebody else walked in and said, this is great, this is better than I thought, this is wonderful. You know, one group was saying this should be a honeymoon suite, yuck. And another person was saying this is a prison, great. What's going on? They interpreted it differently. They received it with different perspectives. They were thinking of different things. They had different expectations of what they deserved. Now, let's be careful for a minute. I am not saying that sickness, that death, that suffering, that loneliness, that loss isn't bad in itself. I am not saying that beauty is all in the eye of the beholder, nor am I saying that ugliness is all in the eye of the beholder. I'm not saying that good is all in the eye of the beholder or bad is all in the eye of the beholder, but I am trying to show you that what we define as pain and troubling to a great degree has to do with the wisdom with which you receive it. That's what James is saying. In other words, it's not suffering and pain, but it's whether you can bear it or not that is determined by the wisdom with which you receive it. The beliefs you have about yourself and about the world and about God and about right and wrong. It's what makes it bearable or not bearable, what makes it helpful or not helpful. What determines whether you'll face it with peace and grow in it or whether you'll face it with despair and be destroyed by it is the wisdom with which you bring it in. Let me show you what I mean let me give you 3 principles of what's called in the Bible the world's wisdom. Now, when the Bible talks about the world's wisdom, what it really means is the world's false wisdom. Beliefs about the nature of things which are really foolishness. And I have to go through this rather quickly just to give you the idea, but it's if you have these beliefs, and to some degree, because we live in the modern world, we all are to some degree sort of soaked with them, marinated a little bit with them. Even if intellectually you reject it, yet your soul still believes a lot of this stuff. And to the degree that you hold to the world's wisdom, to that degree suffering when it comes into your life will be unbearable and unhelpful. Whether you can bear it, whether you can grow in it, completely depends not on the event, but how you interpret the event, how you understand the event. Oh, okay, for example, let me give you 3 things that the modern world believes which have made suffering unbearable for people. And it'll make suffering unbearable for you. And to some degree, you may be crushed today, not because of the event, but because you are holding to some of this wisdom. Now, I'll just give you 3, and I'll be rather quick, because each one is a little bit more, I would say, mischievous. Each false principle is more mischievous. Let me just give you 3. We live in a technological age. We live in a sin-forgetful age, and we live in a secular age. Now, by technological age, I mean that one of the reasons why modern people have far more trouble dealing with the difficulty of life than people even 50 years ago. That 50 years ago, if something went wrong and a child was born with some sort of physical difficulty, nobody ever thought of suing. And now everybody thinks of suing. And I'll tell you the reason why. Science and technology has promised more than it can really offer. We live in an era that says we're in charge. Remember what Lewis says? Technology. We've got technology. And therefore, the first thing I just point out is something has sunk into us. The world's wisdom is that we are now in charge of the universe. We really could make things good if we wanted to. So if there's something wrong, the government should have done it, the doctors should have done it, the school should have done it. Let's yell, let's scream, let's sue. I'm not against lawsuits, but what I'm trying to say is that there's a big difference between the way we were 100 years ago and the way we are now, and it's largely because technology gives us this sort of worldly wisdom, and that is that we're in charge now. Oh, no, we're not. Hey, listen, things are much better, but all the medicine in the world and all the technology in the world has never decreased the death rate. You know what the death rate is? 1 death per person. It's always been the same. And it will never decrease it. Okay? We're not in charge. We are not in charge. Let me give you a second one. I said we live in a technological age that's made suffering far more difficult to bear than it was for even your grandparents. That's false wisdom. That's sunk into a certain degree, and one of the reasons why we're so angry. Somebody could have stopped this, which means we assume that somebody was in control, but the world's still not in control. Somebody once said, yes, we're talking about technology. It says it used to be we prayed for rain, but now we build reservoirs. And if you were here in August, you know that we build reservoirs and we still pray for rain. We haven't really gotten on top of things. Now, secondly, we're in a sin-forgetful age. And this, again, rather brief. I already actually referred to it. Our ancestors tended to believe that morally we all have a lot of trouble, and therefore we really don't deserve a great life. Modern people don't feel that way. Carl Menninger, you know, that famous book, Whatever Became of Sin? Carl Menninger pointed out that modern people, he kind of blamed it on Freud, even though he was, I think, very influenced by Freud. He said, the modern society has taken away our moral model and put in place a medical model. For most of our problems, we use a medical model. For example, I've talked to people who are terribly bitter. They will not forgive, but what do they say? They're hurting. They don't say they're bitter, they say they're hurting. That's a medical term. I'm hurting. Well, yeah, you're hurting. I mean, if you sat there and stabbed yourself in the hip all the time, you could say to the doctor, I'm hurting, and actually the doctor would say, that's not the real problem. You're stabbing yourself. You're doing something stupid. Stop it. You don't have a medical problem. You've got a moral problem. You're doing something wrong. In the same way, we tend to look at a lot of the things that we do and say, well, we're victims, and therefore, by and large, we think we're in pretty good shape. One of the most amazing social research findings is that 90% of Americans believe that they show the kind of love in life that if everybody showed would make society all right. 90%. What's that mean? We think we're okay. We couldn't be okay, because if that was true, then society would be the way we thought it should be. But it can't be. We're seriously out of touch. And because we think we're okay, we all believe the universe owes us a good life. We deserve a good life. And whenever I see the book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People, every time I've looked through it to make sure there's no place where it happens, because I keep referring to this, I want to make sure I'm not being unfair to it. There's an assumption there, and that is, here's this great assumption. We've got a problem. How could God give us this kind of life? And the assumption is we deserve a better life than we have. And nowhere is that assumption ever defended. Nowhere is the evidence marshaled for it. Our ancestors did not believe that we necessarily deserved a better life than we have here. Do we, as a human race, considering the way we treat each other and the way we act toward God, if there is a God, do we deserve a much better life than what we have? Do you think so? If you think so, give me the evidence. But don't just assume it. And people assume it today. World's wisdom. One of the reasons why we're so upset. That's the reason why the one guy went in and said, this is a great room. Why? He knew what he deserved. He was very happy with it. Why do you have so much trouble with your life? It could be because you have this assumption, which is not at all easy to prove. I think all the evidence is against it. But thirdly, we live in a secular world. And a secular world says you've got to have all of your happiness here. If you're going to get happy, you got to have it here. This is the only place. Now, Christians, this is one thing I find pretty interesting. Christians very often will say, I believe in another world. I believe in an eternal world. But we live in a society in which all the plausibility structures, all the literature, all the media, everything comes at us and says this life is all there is. Now, I quoted her last week, but just real briefly, but now let's get it out and look at it. St. Teresa, who was really a Christian mystic, a wonderful woman of God, lived many centuries ago. And when I say she was a mystic, that meant she really, some of you were here a couple years ago when I was talking about communing with God, experiencing God, meditating in prayer. She has written some of the best stuff on this. Meditation, prayer, communion. Remember any of that? She's the one that said, from the perspective of heaven, the worst life on earth will look like one night in a bad hotel. Now you can say, well, of course that would be true. Right? Of course that would be true. If it's true, do you believe it's true? Do you understand if you believe it true, how different things will be? If this life is all there is, we're trapped in about 80 years, and if anything hurts the wealth we have here, we're destroyed. If anything hurts the happiness we have here, the love we have here, we're destroyed, because this is it. It's all here. And we're all, as a result, if this life is all there is no way to deal with suffering. Karl Marx said, the religion is the opiate of the people. If you believe there's another world after this one, you won't be competent here. You won't try to make this world a better place. You won't be competent to live here. I beg to differ. I read an article by a man who said he was a Marxist in the article. It was in the Village Voice. It was about 9 months ago. And it was about a man who said, I'm having risky, unsafe, casual, anonymous sex. He says, I know it's wrong. In fact, I've taught against it. I've taught safe sex seminars. And he said, why am I doing it? And you go through the article, and he said, I came to realize that if I couldn't have sex when I wanted it and with who I wanted it, there was no meaning in my life. Now, what he means is, if I can't have sex now, what else is there to live for? And he's driven, and he knows it. He says, sometimes I feel like a monster, but I can't help it. You call that, Mr. Marx, competence? If this world is all there is, we cannot possibly handle the destruction of those things which we love. You can never do what St. Teresa said, okay, I'm having a bad life, but you know what? Heaven will make amends for all. You can't say that. You're destroyed by it. You're controlled by it. It just can't be looked at that way. And that's the reason why, if you had a little boy, and this again is a C.S. Lewis illustration, a little boy, and he's playing in a mud puddle. And you come up to him and say, honey, I know you're having a great time. Look at that little castle you made over there, and here's your trucks loading, stuff in and out. But we have to get in the car. We're going to drive all day, but when we get there, we're going to get to someplace you've never seen before, the beach. And man, is it going to be great. It's beautiful. And what does the little boy do? He screams, he has a fit, he throws his truck, and he says, what is the beach? I don't even know what the beach is. I like it here. And the mother says, this is so much greater than the mud puddle. You have no idea. And he says, well, how long before we even get to the beach? Well, it won't be till tomorrow morning we will be able to go to the beach. 1 whole day? And he said, forget this. Now, what do you say to a little boy? At a certain point, I had 3 of them. And so at a certain point, you kind of say, well, honey, this, and well, honey, and finally you say, get a life. And say, you do not know what you're talking about. You're 8 years old, you're 6 years old, you're 4-year-old. Get a life. You don't have the perspective. You are stuck in this mud puddle because you don't know anything else. The destruction of your mud puddle is the destruction of everything. What do you think St. Teresa is saying to you? If you at any level believe that this life is all there is, you will not be able to handle anybody even touching your little mud puddle. The wisdom of the world, does that make you more competent to deal with life? Absolutely not. Then, on the other hand, what does make you more competent to deal with it? Let me give you 3 principles of biblical wisdom that if you have these in your heart, if you have these in your heart, then you're going to find that as you receive things, they're processed. Now, here's what they are. Number 1, the first principle of wisdom in the Bible is that you know you're a fool. If you look in the Bible, especially in Proverbs, it'll say, the way you know a fool is a fool thinks he's wise. And the way you know a wise person is a wise person thinks you're foolish. I mean, you can see it. Look, Hitler thought he was wise, but he was a fool. Lincoln was always aware of his foolishness, but he was very wise. That's just the way of the world. If there's anybody in this room who doesn't feel like, when it comes to the world and the human heart and doing the right thing, if you don't feel like a fool, you are a great fool. If you think I've got it, I think I know what I'm doing, I'm on my way in life, you see, you're a fool. Now I'll tell you this, the main thing that crushes you when you get into the presence of suffering is if you are sure you know exactly how the world would go best if you were in charge. In other words, if you say, I know how things should be. I know how things should be. When suffering comes, you will be crushed. But if instead you come and say, well, I don't know very much. I know very little. And I see how little I know. And I need to grow and understand. Who's to say? I thought this should have happened, but this happened instead. Who's to say? I don't know. God knows. If you go with humility, it's bearable. It's bearable. There's a George MacDonald, who was a 19th century Scottish novelist and writer. He has a great little line here, and he says, every difficulty indicates something more than our theory of life can bear. Your trouble, the thing that confuses you, instead of getting mad at God, you ought to realize my theory of life. This is showing my theory of life to be inadequate. Now, if you're already a wise person, and the mark of wisdom is to know that you're not wise, to know that you don't know much about life, to know that God is far wiser than you, that is the mark of wisdom. If you come into suffering that way, you'll be able to bear it. Look at yourselves right now. Some of you are not dealing with life only because you're sure you know how it ought to go, which is the lack of wisdom. Here's a scientist. Originally, scientists had a theory of wave action. Theory of waves. Then they realized at some point, I don't know when, it's been years because I've used this illustration for 20 years, they came to find out that light sometimes operates as waves and sometimes as particles, right? And we know, according to the current theory of waves, that a wave can't have matter. It can't have matter. But here's light that sometimes seems to act like a particle, like matter, sometimes it doesn't. So what did the scientists do when they came to realize that light could act sometimes as a wave, sometimes as a particle, but their current theories were that couldn't be? What did they say? Did they say, forget science, throw it away, life is meaningless, the universe is irrational? No, what did they say? They said, we have discovered a difficulty which is greater than our theory of light can bear. And so what we do is we don't have a better theory, but we're going to proceed and hope that we'll get a better theory and that we'll learn from things. They didn't say, what's the wrong with light? They said, what's wrong with our theory? We're not wise enough. Now you go out into the world and you say, well, this should happen and that should happen. I've lived a good life. And yet here I'm alone. I lived a good life and here I got sick. What do you say? What's wrong with life? Or do you say, my theory of life, my theory? Scientists don't do it. Why should you? The first principle of wisdom that you need with which to receive is you know that your wisdom is limited. Secondly, and I have to be brief here, though I'd love to pull it on out. The second thing the Bible tells you that you got to know if you're going to deal with suffering is this world is temporary. Suffering is not our lot in life. We came from a golden era. We fell from it. God did not make us for the brokenness of this world. And we are going back, if we trust Him, to a time in which there is no more brokenness. Now, you've got to know that. Now, and if you don't know that, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have to put on your thinking cap for this one. A lot of people, when suffering comes into their lives, they say, this proves that there can't be a God. This proves that life is meaningless. And yet, listen to what Pascal says. Your outrage at suffering. You look at suffering and you say this is unnatural, and you look at death and you're outraged by it. And Pascal said that couldn't be if suffering was all there is. And he puts it this way. He says, who would think himself unhappy for having only one mouth? Who indeed would think himself unhappy not to be a king except one who had been dispossessed? If we'd never known anything but corruption, you would have no idea of truth or bliss. Now here was what he's saying. You got to put on your thinking cap for a minute, okay? He says, why is nobody going around saying, I just am so upset with the fact I only have one mouth? Why would God allow this? I've never heard anybody get upset about this. Why would God allow this? Why? And now you say, that's ridiculous. You know why it's ridiculous? Nobody's ever had two mouths. Nobody even has, therefore nobody's ever had a conception of two mouths. Therefore nobody thinks it's unjust that we don't have two mouths. Okay, here's what Pascal is saying. If this world is all there is, where'd you get the idea that there's anything wrong with death? If there's no God, why are you outraged with suffering? I read a little article by Madeleine Mary O'Hare, Why I Don't Believe in God. She was an atheist lady. Why I don't believe in God. And here's what she said. She says, I don't believe in truth because, look at Hitler. He thought he had the truth and he killed all the Jews. Look at the Catholic Church, she said. This is what she said, by the way. She says, they thought they had the truth and they did the Inquisition. People who think they have truth do these awful things, so I don't even believe in truth anymore. And you want to say, wait a minute. If there's no truth, what in the world are you disgusted about? Wait a minute. I don't believe in God because I hate the suffering. Wait a minute. If there's no God, then this is just the way it is. Marquis de Sade said, what is right. This is life. The animals aren't scandalized by it. I mean, they try to survive, but they're not scandalized by it. Why are we? Pascal says, the very fact that you're outraged at suffering proves that you're not built for it, that you're not from a world like this, that there's hope, that there's a God. In other words, if you decide, I don't believe in God because of suffering, you've created a much, much huger problem than Christians have. Because now you can't even define suffering. You can't even be disgusted about it. You can only be disgusted about it if you know that deep in your heart, this isn't right. And that could only happen if there's a place where this doesn't exist. Thirdly, and lastly, you have to know that your wisdom is limited. You have to know that you're, as we just said, that you've come from a better place. But lastly, last of all, you have to know about Jesus' death on the cross. Why? Well, listen, Jesus' death, let me give this as the bottom line and just show you what I mean. Jesus' death solves the problem of suffering in general. It just doesn't solve the problem of your particular suffering. For example, when I say to you, Christians are continually saying, it's not fair. Here I am a Christian. Here I am doing these great things for God, and I'm suffering. It's not fair. And if I look at them and say, well, now let me just ask you a question. Jesus Christ suffered unjustly. He suffered tremendous pain and tremendous injustice. So why are you better than him? What makes you think that a servant should be above the master? And you know what people usually say? They say, well, I understand why he suffered. And right there, do you see? You're suffering. The problem you've got is not the event. It's that you don't have the wisdom to understand. But in Jesus Christ, the Bible gives you the wisdom for this one piece of suffering. Are you going to shake your fist just because God hasn't given you your book? But don't you see that in Jesus Christ, he's given us every book? Jesus Christ looks at us and says, I stood my ground and suffered, obeying my Father. And because I suffered obediently, you have been redeemed. Redemption flew out of it. Now, I'm asking you, since I suffered for you, I'm asking for you to suffer for me. I'm asking you to go through this suffering, and all I want you to do is stand your ground. If you were praying before, keep praying. If you were studying the Bible before, keep studying the Bible. If you were being kind to other people, keep being kind to other people. If you were obeying the Ten Commandments, keep obeying the Ten Commandments. Just do what I did. Stand your ground. Stay put. And wisdom will come to you, because you will find that redemption is working. You will get humbler. You will get more compassionate. You will get more faithful. See, Jesus is saying, my book is your book. Maybe not particular. Maybe it doesn't tell you exactly why. But I'm telling you why. You say, well, you didn't quite answer the question, how wisdom will come. Oh, yes, I did. But look at it. It says, be single-minded. Now, you know what single-mindedness means? It means the same thing as perseverance. It means to say, I'm going to obey. I'm not going to have two loyalties. I'm going to have one loyalty. No divided loyalties. I'm going to obey. And then you notice what it says? It says, if you ask God to help you and your single-mindedness, it doesn't say wisdom may come. It says, what does it say? It will come. Interesting right now that child psychologists are saying that we're born with temperaments. I'll just give you two of them. Neurochemical. Some people are anxious, which means when a threat comes, these are kids, we're born with these. When a threat comes, the anxious kids run away. The aggressive kids go toward it. See, the anxious kids, when a threat comes, you get out of there. The aggressive kids, when a threat comes, they go after it to see if they can do it before it gets done to them. And here's what the child psychiatrists say. That means that we're fundamentally unwise. You know why we're unwise? Because anxious kids will habitually run, and aggressive kids will habitually go. And he says, if therefore you put an anxious kid in a situation where the wise thing to do is to run, they'll be in great shape. If you put them in a situation where the wise thing to do is to go forward, they'll be killed. If you put an aggressive kid in a place, because aggressive kids habitually go forward, in a place where they ought to run, they'll be killed. But in a place where the best thing to do is go after, then they'll be in great shape. And here's what the psychiatrists are saying now. They're saying the best thing that parents can do is take kids out of their game plan. Push them. Push anxious kids into situations where they got to go forward. Push aggressive kids into situations where they've got to retreat. Why? Because they have got to have the range. They're not wise. They're naturally fools. We're all naturally fools. We habitually do certain things. And the only way for parents to make the kids wise is to get them out of their game plan. Is to put them in situations you're terribly uncomfortable in, so that you learn out of your comfort zone the full range of responses so you can be wise. Jesus Christ did not have a temperament. You read, he's not anxious, he's not aggressive, he's not phlegmatic, he's not choleric, he's not sanguine. You know what he is? He's wise. He always does the important thing. He always does the right thing. He speaks when he should speak. He shuts up when he should shut up. He never treats a friend as an enemy or an enemy as a friend. Never. Why? He knows. He's absolutely wise. In him all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hid. And he's wise, and he suffered. And by suffering, he will make you wise. He will make you like himself. It will come. He's taking you out of his game plan now. Just stay put. Just be single-minded. Just don't leave. And it will come. Let's pray. Our Father, give us the wisdom that comes from above. But now we see this doesn't mean we ask for it without any uncertainty. we see what it means is that we obey you and we look for it to come and we proceed knowing that it will come. Thank you that you've told us so many things in your word that if we apply them will help us to receive your wisdom. And then once we do that, it will help us to receive suffering in a way that we are become mature, lacking nothing. This is very difficult territory. Many of us are really wrestling under weights of things that really are pain. Help us to see how much our pain and our suffering is aggravated by our foolishness. Teach us how to ask for the wisdom that comes from above and to receive it so we'll become like your Son, in whose name we pray. Amen.